Welcome to the Jazz Flyte podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte podcast. I am Darrell Scott. Our guest today is a young man. You may not have heard of him from the jazz standpoint, but he's got a history with some other folks that is just tremendous. The first thing we want to talk about, this is Adrian Crutchfield. He tells a very interesting story about a meeting with KennyG. Adrian, can you tell us that story? Because I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. I mean, it's really almost cinematic. I mean, I'm telling you, one day I will write a book about all these things that have happened in my life that, it seems like it was made for TV or made for a movie,
Mm-hmm.
but these are true stories, and it starts with KennyG. Just when I was a young kid, I was about 4 years old. I went to a concert with my parents in my hometown, and it was a KennyG concert. Now, back then, you could take your kids if they were young enough, and you didn't have to pay for them to get in or whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what happened. And at this time, KennyG was at the top of his game. This is when smooth jazz was pop music at that point.
Right. Yes.
So this is like being at a Beyonce concert,
Mm-hmm.
and we're at the Civic Center, and there's lights and fog and the music and the lasers, and it's like the circus to me as a kid.
Right.
um and everybody's standing up, and we're on the floor. We have floor seats, and I got on my dad's shoulder so I could see everything, and I'm watching, and I just noticed that KennyG is playing, and he's walking the stage and working the crowd, and he keeps stopping and looking over in my direction. So eventually he goes to the microphone, he stops everybody, stops the band, and says, "I could have sworn I saw a toddler in the audience."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, who brings a baby to a jazz concert?"
Right.
And so spotlight starts going around, and they stop on me, and he starts talking to me and my family and saying, do you like jazz and all this stuff. And he had them bring me to the stage, and after that he asked me a couple questions, and then he played for me, and then he asked me if I wanted to play the saxophone, and I said yes. And he gave me my first saxophone, and that's what
Wow.
started my whole trajectory as a musician, is that moment of him literally putting it in my hand. And so that's the story.
At this point of your life, how aware are you of what is going on? Because I know
Uh,
your parents are probably just
yeah,
proud as they can be. They're beaming. You don't need no lights
yeah,
because they're shining enough.
yeah. I literally just saw it as this guy's giving me his toy. I was like, okay, cool, because the saxophone that he gave me is actually a wind synthesizer. If
Mm-hmm.
for those of you who don't know what a wind synthesizer is, um, the modern day wind synthesizer that everybody knows, there's two of them. There's the Akai Iwi, which is an
Mm-hmm.
electronic wind instrument, which is one I play now. And then there's also the Roland Aerophone, which is another synthesizer. This was the Casio, which was one of the first ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the time KennyG was an endorser, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was giving them out at every show. But he found me, and he gave me that one. And to my parents, I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure that they were beaming, and this is a big moment. For me, it looked like a toy, and I couldn't wait to get home and play with it. That's that's what I saw. Is, it looked like a spaceship to me. And so, but with that paired with the experience of the lights and the smoke and
Mm-hmm.
the lasers and the music and the band, all of that to me was very intriguing. I just fell in love with the entertainment industry and the showbiz and the stage. I fell in love with the stage uh, that night. And to my hometown, I'm not from a big town, so my hometown, everybody there saw that as somewhat of an omen. And so from that moment on, we were invited to every concert that happened. We were invited and told to come backstage for every show for the next year.
Really?
I got to meet Barry White. I got to meet MC Hammer, Karen White, Boys to Men. I mean, I met so many people I don't even remember. And that's the thing is, half of this stuff, I was 4 or 5 years old. I don't
Right.
remember a lot of these moments. I remember specific ones. I remember Karen White because she took me from my mom and was literally walking around with me backstage, holding me until she went on stage. And so I remember that. I remember MC Hammer because his show is unforgettable. I mean,
Right.
but but it was that that omen led to everybody basically saying that's what he's gonna do. He's gonna be an entertainer. And thankfully, I actually stuck with it. It was something that I love. Once I really got into the saxophone and got into music, um, it stuck, and it was just like, this is what I want to do. And so my parents were very supportive, and they kept me with it. My parents, my godparents, my family, everybody in my hometown, everybody knew. I mean, if I got presents for my birthday or Christmas, they were always music related.
Oh yeah.
And so
Nice.
it was just gonna be what it was.
So how soon after that did you really start playing and learning how to play that instrument?
So I was 4 when I got the wind synthesizer. My mom got me an actual saxophone for that Christmas. But again, I was 4 years old, so I wasn't big enough to play it.
Right.
I just had it, and I kind of messed around with it. Like, I tried, but it was too big for me, and I didn't have any of my permanent teeth. That's one of the things KennyG said, was wait until he gets his permanent teeth before he let him play. Of course, we didn't do that.
Right.
But I played around at it for years. I'd figure out how to play whatever melody, Mary Had a Little Lamb or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, that type of thing. I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had all the karaoke toys, the guitar with
Right.
the amp that lights up and the microphone. I had all of that, the toy drum set, all those things I had, and none of my friends wanted to do that. They wanted to play with action figures. They wanted to play, with water guns and etc.
Right.
And I would be walking down the street with my wagon full of my band gear, like, we're gonna start a band. We're gonna start a band.
And they're
Nobody
like,
wanted to do that.
we won't do that.
So yeah, it took all the way up until I moved to Charlotte when I was about 10 years old. And shortly after that, I went into the 5th grade, and there was band. So band started in the 5th grade, school band. And because I already had a saxophone, it just made sense. I was going to play
Mm-hmm.
saxophone. And I was terrible. I mean, I couldn't keep up. I was one of the worst people there. And I would go home and I would try to practice, and my mom would get mad. She's like, I'm trying to watch the news. And she would make me play in the closet, and that type of stuff. And eventually, I went back to what I knew how to do, which was figure out melodies, like the easy melodies, like Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I just started trying to make them sound like jazz. So I would just kind of swing them a little bit, and people started to take notice to that. And that came with positive affirmation and reaffirmation, and eventually it kind of stuck, and I got better.
So you're 4 or 5, you're young.
Yeah,
All of a sudden, do you have a different set of attention coming at you? Because now, number one, everybody in the neighborhood has seen you go on stage with Kenny G.
yeah.
You have a saxophone and you're playing. I,
Mhm.
I just got a feeling that if I was one of your friends, I would just gravitate to you because you're going to be cool because you're
Yeah, no,
playing
I mean,
music.
no, that was not the case at all. Most of my friends, they'd be like, "Here come Adrian again. He want to, he's gonna want to." we were building. This is a time period where, and I'm giving away my age here, but this is a time period where we still went outside to play.
Oh yeah.
And we were. I still remember building tree houses and stuff like that with my
Mm-hmm.
friends, playing in the woods and being out until the street lights came on. So, playing football in the field, knowing good and
Right.
well there's probably dog doo-doo all over that field,
Yes. Yes.
and tackle full contact football and stuff like that. So we did all of those things, and every now and then I would bring my stuff out and be like, I want to start a band. And my friends would entertain it for a little while,
Right.
but then they'd be like, all right, well, we're gonna play wrestling now, or we're gonna go and play army, or
Right.
we're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
go and get the water guns out, or we're gonna go
Mm-hmm.
build a clubhouse, or we're gonna go exploring. Or it was always stuff like that. Their attention spans were diverse. They wanted to do different things, and
Right.
so for me, everything I wanted was music related. I was like,
So
I
let's
want this play drum set or whatever. And so
let's move.
eventually they got tired of it, and they let me just kind of go play by myself.
Okay. Which technically was very beneficial and good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's move forward a little bit because
Okay.
your resume to me is incredible
Thank you.
because it's not one of you hear about people who started in class or classically trained and played with this person and they drop all kinds of names.
Hmm.
We can start with who do we want to start with? CeeLo Green, Anthony Hamilton, Lionel Richie. How do you gravitate from this 5-year-old kid struggling to play because your friends won't play with you
Yeah.
to all of a sudden being in Lionel Richie's band?
So if we go forward to when I moved to Charlotte, not long after that, things started to really roll.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I moved to Charlotte when I was 10. By the time I was 12, I had a private teacher, a jazz musician here in Charlotte. His name is Michael Porter.
Mm-hmm.
He's a jazz flautist who also plays saxophone. And there was a large community of musicians here, including a group called the Sign of the Times Big Band, which is led by a gentleman named Tyrone Jefferson. Tyrone Jefferson was an integral part of the James Brown Association, and he was a trombonist. And so Michael Porter, Tyrone Jefferson, and that whole camp of Sign of the Times Big Band, and in that community, I spent a lot of time with them, and just hanging out after school, going to their events. I would study with Michael Porter after school, and at this place called the African American Cultural Center, while my mom was still at work, and then she would come pick me up from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I got accepted into this thing called the Community School of the Arts here in Charlotte, which is an after-school private lessons program. And that's where I started studying classical music with a gentleman named James Curry. And James Curry that's where things got really kind of hard, because I was so used to impressing people by playing, just swinging some melody that I could figure out if I
Right.
have something on the radio. And Mr. Curry was like, absolutely not. We're going to play this etude now. We're going to play this classical piece, and you're going to learn how to read these things. Because I still couldn't really read music. I pretended to, but I really couldn't. I don't think I learned how to read music officially until probably 11th grade.
Wow.
But yeah, when I was 12, I would start to try to book things. I started playing for the African American Children's Theater, and they did a production of The Wiz, and I was in the pit orchestra for that.
Right.
And I think that was my first taste of show business. But from there, and Mr. Porter, working with Mr. Porter, I started to book little things where I could go with my little boombox and my play-alongs, and I could play the tracks for a little bit of money as a gig. And I remember one of the gigs I was doing was for the opening of the Urban League here in Charlotte. And Mr. Porter was also playing that day with a jazz pianist named J.R. Reese. And it was J.R. Reese and Kevin Jones, was a singer. And I was playing my little thing before they played, and Kevin Jones said, that was pretty good. He said, you should come and play with us. you should come and play with us at the club tonight. We'll feature you. And I always thought this was funny. I always remember this because Mr. Porter wasn't there at that moment when
Right.
he said that. But I'd always told Mr. Porter, one day I'm going to play in the jazz clubs with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that night I went to the jazz. My mom took me to the jazz club, and I showed up, and Mr. Porter saw me. He said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm here to play with you." Like I said, and that started my playing at nightclubs. That was at, like I said, age 12, and that's when I started to see, oh, I can make money at this.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would pay me a little bit to come in and play a little bit, and I'd go to the bar and get my virgin daiquiri.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I got started. And from there, from the time I was 12 until the time I was probably 17, I would just kind of sneak into the back door of a lot of clubs in Charlotte. I won't say any names because I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Not a problem.
But but a lot of the clubs in Charlotte, it went from me going there, my mom bringing me to, there was one particular club that was literally a few blocks from where I lived. And so I would literally sneak out sometimes and ride my bike over there with my horn on my back. And I would sneak in the back door. The guys in the band knew I was coming. They would just leave the back door cracked, and I would sneak in. And by this time, I should also point out that I was at a school of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was finally with people who had the same goals as me. So a lot of my peers were also musicians. So a lot of us would do that. We would, especially once some of us got driver's licenses.
Oh, yeah.
We would conspire and we would go to the club. And I don't know why I didn't think this, but I didn't think my mom would find out.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. And then, of course, and now to be fair, this is before social media.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So I just didn't think she would know. But of course they would call and tell her.
Of course.
He's here, and then she would let me be there, but then when I got home, I caught it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the beginning, and then from there, I got to play with, sit in with, because of my reputation in town.
Right.
I got to sit in with great artists. I got to sit in with the Gap Band once. I got to play with Foreplay once. And then from there, I went off to college. And while I was in school, an old family friend called, who actually was a barber when I knew him. But he needed a sax player. And so I figured out a way to get out of college and go and tour with him. And that was Anthony Hamilton.
Nice.
That was my first major tour, was with Anthony.
All right. Before we go on, I think people need to hear some of the work that you've done.
Sure.
So let's listen to Know Your Heart from our guest on the Jazz Flyte podcast, Mr. Adrian Crutchfield. And if you're wondering what I'm doing, Brody's being active, and maybe we'll put him on camera so everybody can see him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Know Your Heart on the Jazz Flyte podcast. You mentioned your stuff starting out, but there's, and it's fun. I'm going to mention a name who you are going to know, and he'll be on the show in a couple of weeks. Marcus Anderson, excuse me.
Marcus Anderson, okay.
Marcus Anderson.
Yeah.
So you are the last horn player to play with Prince? Is that true?
I am. Yes, I am.
What is the call like from Prince? Hey, you know what? I think I like your work. Will you come go on a tour with me? Are you shaking? Are you did you go, this really is Prince, is it?
I actually did do that.
Did you?
And you brought up Marcus. So again, this is one of those situations that I think is very cinematic. It could be in a movie. But this is one of those moments. So Marcus and I were we had become close at some point before that. and we just hit it off really well, to where we both had the same mindset as far as playing and innovating and style. And the one thing we knew was a lot of sax players are very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
We met in a competitive environment, and we immediately realized that we were like kindred. And so we were literally from that moment on best friends. I mean, we talked all the time. If I couldn't do a show, I sent him. If he couldn't do a show, he sent me.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of how we decided we wanted to go from then on. Is like, I trust him, he trusts me. A lot of industry guys, they're gonna, if they get on the gig, they're gonna try to take it. They're gonna try to
Right.
keep it.
Right.
So he and I just hit it off right away, and we met through a band we both played for frequently, and it was a band called Intertwined here in Charlotte, and who happens to be the backing band at that time for Anthony Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
So when Prince came to Charlotte the last time for the Welcome to America tour, Anthony Hamilton was the opening act. And Anthony called and said, I want to put the horn section together because I know Prince is going to have one, and we gotta represent. So
Right.
Marcus and I were basically the point men for the horn section. We had a whole bunch of heavy hitters come in, and we put this horn section together for this performance, and we opened for Prince. And that was,
Nice.
I think, the first time that he had seen us. And the idea was we wanted to put together a horn section that was going to dance. It was going to do all the things that
Right.
most horn sections don't do.
Right.
Because we want to turn his head. We want to get his attention. And so that's what happened. And literally a few months later, I was doing a gig somewhere, and Marcus called me. Now, I should also say this. The cool thing about the New Power Generation was there were a lot of Carolinians in the band.
Oh, were there?
So, yeah, you got, first off, let's start with John Blackwell, God rest his soul. That's a Carolinian, South Carolina. So the drummer, John Blackwell, the legend, who also passed away, you know him from Prince, you know him from Cameo. He played with everybody, but D'Angelo, but he was a Carolinian, South Carolina. You had Shelby J, who's the world famous Shelby J, the one and only, the singer. You would know her from Super Bowl. She's the bald lady, but on Super Bowl, I think she had braids.
Mm-hmm.
But she was always Prince's right hand, on stage. And so she was a Carolinian. You had Cassandra O'Neal on keys, who had lived in Charlotte for a long time. And so we knew her. And there were a few others that Maceo Parker, when he was in the band, he's Carolinian,
Mm-hmm.
So we had all these Carolina connections, and we saw them at the show. So later, I was doing something. I don't remember exactly where I was, but I got a call from Marcus, and Marcus at the time was just beginning his trajectory as a solo artist. So he was playing with the Sax Pack at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he called me and said, hey, he said, I need to talk to you. And I said, what's up? He said, I got called about this opportunity, and I need you to cover for me. I need you to go and play some of the Sax Packs gigs for me. And I said, sure, I got your back. And so he said, okay, I'll shoot you the details. But he said, I can't really tell anybody right now, but I just got called about this opportunity to work with Prince.
Mm-hmm.
He's producing another artist, and he wants me to come out and work with that artist. And it's an opportunity to work with Prince. I was like, that's great. That's a win for all of us.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think Andrew Goucher had recommended, as a bass player at the time for Prince, he had recommended Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, Cassandra O'Neal had recommended myself. And so literally about 30 minutes after that phone call conversation with Marcus, I got a call from Paisley Park. It wasn't Prince. It was just somebody at Paisley Park.
Right.
And she said something along the lines of, hey, this is such and such at Paisley Park, and we'd really like you to come out. Are you available to come out and work with this new artist that Prince is producing? We'd like you to help build the horn section. And my response was, you tell Marcus that's real funny. And I hung up the phone.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Oh.
And so Cassandra O'Neal called me I tried to call Marcus back. He didn't answer. So Cassandra O'Neill called me and she said, "Hey, did you get a call from Paisley?" I said, "Yeah, I got that call from Marcus. He ain't funny." And she said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "No, Paisley's trying to call you. They want you to come out and work with this artist, Andy Allo." And so I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Just can you have them call me back?" And she said, "Yeah." And so they called me back and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I got Sprint and my signal was real bad." And that's how, I saved that relationship. But they described that they were working with a new artist named Andy Allo, and Prince was producing her, and he wanted us to build a horn section of young, athletic, dancing horn section. And so that's how the conversation started. And of course, then it was it was really cool, but it was also really strange that they called both of us
Right.
simultaneously, and then we had that conversation. But it was just really cool. And eventually we got to go to Paisley and we started working with Andy Allo. But all along, my goal was we're gonna get on that stage with Prince, and
Hmm.
eventually that's what happened. And so it was beautiful.
Nice. Now I have a twofold question.
Yeah,
One might be a bit emotional. What was the experience like working with Prince? But then also, after his death, how did that affect you from a playing standpoint, from a personal standpoint?
yeah. So first of all, working with Prince is an emotional roller coaster. It it was terrifying because here you have, in my opinion, one of the greatest artists of our time,
All time.
of all time, really, but
Hmm.
definitely of our time.
Hmm.
This is an icon, and you're working with him, and he has a reputation for turning on a dime.
Right.
So it's not a matter of if you're gonna get fired; it's when. Um, and it doesn't matter why. It's just he's tired of this. He wants to do something else. He's an artist,
Right.
true and through and through. He's an artist, and you'll notice that I typically speak of Prince in a present tense. I never do speak of him in a past tense
Right.
unless I really think about it, because
Hmm.
I just feel like his energy did not die. It
Right.
just transferred into other stuff. And so, yeah, working with Prince was amazing. I learned more, and this is not to deter. If there are kids out there listening, go to school, go to college, get a if you just go get a trade, go to trade school if you have to, but go
Right.
get an education. But with that being said, I'm also going to say this: I learned more at Paisley Park than I ever learned at any university, um,
Hmm.
and I take that, you know, I take that education very personally, and that's what prepared me for the industry, even though I had done a lot of touring before that.
Right.
Um, Working with Prince was the best education. I saw the best of the best of the best in everything we did,
Hmm.
and and but I also saw that anything is possible because Prince, being an artist, he liked to do things last minute. He liked to,
Yeah.
it's just he felt like doing it, so this is what we're gonna do. And what that allowed me to see was it's not impossible to do it, no matter how much time you have.
Right.
It can be done. It's just a matter of who's willing to put the work in. And what I noticed was, well, if I ask somebody to do these things, it's
Right.
going to be a fight. But if Prince is asking, or if this person is asking, then they're going to drop everything and
Right.
do it because of the name. And so I learned a lot in that aspect. And then I guess to the second part of your question, what was it like? You said, what was it like after he passed?
Yeah.
It was devastating, because although I'm an artist, I had built my career. That was the one difference between, to me, that was the difference between myself and Marcus. Marcus had spent his career building himself as an artist,
Hmm.
and he did the sideman thing on the side.
Right.
I did it the opposite way. So I spent my whole career. I put out an album when I first graduated college called Private Party. And I was so deterred by the music industry as an independent artist.
Right.
I didn't get the support I thought I would get, and there
Right.
was all these rules, and nobody wanted to play my stuff on radio because the jazz stations wouldn't play it because it was too urban and aggressive, and the urban stations wouldn't play it because it was saxophone. So I
Right.
was in this limbo,
Right.
and I didn't like the industry at that point as far as what I saw from how they treated independent artists. And so I made a decision, and I was like, I'm cool I like being the supporting role. I like being the side man, and I want to eventually be the Maceo Parker to somebody's James
Oh,
Brown.
right.
That was my goal. Is I want to be that staple to somebody's show.
Mm-hmm.
You have Clarence Clemens with the E Street Band.
Right.
You have Maceo with James Brown. You have Slash. I wanted to be that.
Yeah.
And so I started building my career that way. And Prince was the pinnacle. Like when I reached that point, it was like, this is it. Now keep in mind, I'd also toured with Lionel Richie.
Yeah.
And that was great too. But I also knew that was, it was fleeting because Lionel's super loyal. He's the opposite. So Lionel's got the same band that he's had for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I knew eventually Dino, his sax player, was going to come back. And I can't compete with Dino because Dino's got that investment. He's been there.
Mm-hmm.
So Prince was really, I saw that and I said, you know what? I'm a fan. I know all the music. This is the opportunity. And I'm going to be the Maceo to his James Brown. And so I say all that to say, I built my relationship with him on that premise of I don't need to be a front man.
Right.
I'll play frontman shows on the side when we're not doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, every show I ever did during my time with Prince, my contract, if I had a festival or anything, my contract said, if Prince calls, I'm going. And you just have to be okay with that. And I'll give you the money back and everything else. But if Prince calls, that's priority. So when he passed away, or when he transitioned, all I could think about was our last conversation. At the time, we were recording an album with Mono Neon, and we were at Paisley Park. And there's a whole backstory to this with Warner Brothers and his relationship with Warner Brothers. But he had done this thing, and he had created this concept called peer-to-peer distribution, where he didn't want to give the label any credit.
Right.
So he created this network where he could sell records without the help of a label. And it was brilliant. So that by the time an album came out, it was already gold from sales because of the network. And so he wanted us to be endorsers of that. He wanted us to sell our records on it. He also wanted us to be the ones selling his record in our regions.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a conversation about my record that I had done and why I hadn't done any more records. And I told him then, I thought, again, keep in mind, it's not if you're going to be fired by Prince, but when.
When, okay.
So my thought process was, if I tell him how I feel about being the Maceo to his James Brown, it's going to appease him and he's going to keep me around longer.
Right.
So when we had that conversation, that's what I did. I told him, I said, I never did another record because I didn't see the point. I like being the side man. I like being the Maceo to your James Brown. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, yeah, he said, that's cool. He said, and you'll always be, you always have a place here. But he said, James is dead.
Don't you hate that answer?
Yeah. And literally it was just like a stunning silence when he said that. He said, James,
right.
What's Maceo doing now?
Right.
And I thought about it and I said, Maceo's a front man. And he said, exactly. He said, so, sometimes you have to put yourself out there. You owe it to yourself and to your audience. And I said, yeah, but the industry's not going to accept me because I don't fit the cookie cutter mold of what a jazz saxophonist is or a smooth jazz saxophonist is, or this or that. He said, you put your stuff out there and let us worry about the rest.
Right.
He said, well, if they don't push it, we will. And he said, sometimes you have to take a leap for yourself. And that was one of the last conversations we had at Paisley before he transitioned. So when he died, all I could think about was that. I was devastated. I was demotivated. I didn't want to do anything. And quite selfishly, my thought process was, number one, my mentor, my idol, my friend is gone. This icon is gone.
Right.
But my gig is gone. Like, this is the gig I've wanted for my entire life. And I finally got it. And now it's gone. and I don't know how I'm gonna make money. I don't know where to go from here. And all that kept happening in my head was sometimes you have to take a leap for yourself.
Leap of faith. Yep.
And so that's when I put out my second record, Leap. And I was kind of still I was upset. Selfishly, I was upset with Prince because I knew I was like, there's no way I'm gonna get any kind of support for this record
Right.
without him. And I put it out, and I put the title song out as the radio single, and it went to like number 26 or 25 on Billboard, and I was like, what? And so that started my career as a solo artist. And every time I would try to go back and be a sideman, which I've done my entire life, what I realized was that the artists were all comfortable because they made the schedules. The schedule was catering
Right.
to them. So these people have houses and properties and businesses, and they can take vacations. But I was still living at a point where I'm like, I need to make money. I need to
Right.
know where my money's coming from. And I don't know until because I'm on your whim.
Right.
And every time I come to that conversation, Prince would be in my head and be like, sometimes you have to take a leap for yourself. And so that's when I started to really push as a solo artist.
All
And
right.
so while his death was devastating to me, it also opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so that's why I'm in the position I'm in now.
All right. Once again, let's take a little break and listen to some work that you've done. This is a tune called Lover on the Jazz Flyte podcast with our guest, Adrian Crutchfield. Our guest today on the Jazz Flyte podcast is Adrian Crutchfield. You are going to hear a lot about this guy. So, Adrian, what is up next? What you got going on? How can we follow you? Because I believe people need to follow you because number one, you have an excellent resume. Your history is great. And the stuff we played today, just snippets, are wonderful. So, how can we find you? What you got going on?
So the easiest way to find me is if you just go to Google and type in real good sax, all one word. It'll bring up, as far as I know, it'll bring up everything about me. Also, that's my Instagram handle and my TikTok. Even though I absolutely hate TikTok, but I have to have it. So Instagram and TikTok is real good sax. Twitter, if you use that, or X or whatever it's called now,
Right.
is just good sax. And then AdrianCrutchfield.com or www.ilovegoodsax.com. Now, if you typo that, I'm not
You are
responsible.
not responsible.
Not responsible for whatever comes up on your computer and then goes into your algorithm and feeds into your social media. I can't be held responsible for that. So make sure you type it in right. I love good sax with an A.com. So that's how you find me. As far as what's going on right now, I'm still touring. I'm doing my own shows a lot more now, thankfully. But I'm also touring still with other artists. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be. So right now I'm touring mostly with Brian Culbertson, the great jazz pianist and trombonist. And I'm having a lot of fun with him. I've also been touring recently with CeeLo Green again, which is great. Last year I toured with Jonathan Butler, and I hope to do more of that. If you are going to be on the Dave Koz cruise, I will be there. I love that cruise. It's my favorite thing to do every year. I love Dave Koz. I'm a big fan. I've always been a big fan. So like I said, one of the best things about this is what makes it like a movie for me. This is like a Cinderella story for me, because there are all these people that I literally grew up imagining, being around and fantasizing about playing with. And now these are my friends, these are my peers, these are people I can call on the phone, and I get to spend time with them, and they see me as an equal, and it's just really, really surreal. So I'm very thankful for it. But yeah, that's how you find me.
I want to say this. We talked, this is our second or third time talking.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's an energy that you have about yourself.
Mhm.
It is one, once we hear conversations and hear about the stuff that you're doing versus the stuff that you have done,
Yeah.
it's like you want to be connected to you. You want to
Mm,
follow you. And that's the thing I find
yeah.
totally cool about you. And there's
Thank
just the way you talk and the way we relate. The one thing about this show is I've talked to a whole bunch of people,
you.
and
Mhm.
there are some folks, I won't say they're standoffish, but they're kind of standoffish, and you can get
Right.
that. But there are other people it's like, dude, if you're in Cleveland, let's get together. And I will say this, let's have a beverage.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Let's have a and it's just sit down and talk. Um, there's some people you want to talk about music. There's some other things that you want to talk about personal life. You want to talk about just the things that you're doing. And then there's a comfort to you.
Yeah.
There's I can't wait to hear more music. That's the other
Mm,
thing I want to do. I want to hear more music. And yes,
it's
he's
coming.
barking in the background. Okay.
He's
When it
barking.
comes out, let us
Yeah.
know. We'll post it on our social media so everybody
Right.
can see it and hear it. And just kind of stay in touch.
So I'll say this, and we talked about this earlier. Recently, I decided to sign a record deal, which is something I was kind of against. And again, that was another thing that Prince would have been like, no, 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 no,
Right,
don't.
right.
But every time this is gonna sound crazy, but a lot of times when I'm making decisions like that, he comes into my mind
Oh,
and he
most
haunts
definitely.
me.
I
He
get it.
haunts me. And when I was making this decision, I actually, for the first time ever, I stumped him. This is not real Prince, but Prince in my mind.
Hmm.
I stumped him because he said, "Don't sign a record deal," and my argument was, I need the machine. I need the marketing machine that they
Right,
have. I need the tools that they have
right.
to go to the next level. And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well," I said, "You did it." And then he didn't say anything else. And so again, with this label thing, I'm excited because while normally I wouldn't want to sign to a label, I like my independence, I like my freedom.
Hmm.
I understand the power and the support of a label and what they do. And so I signed a record deal with a group called Trippin' and Rhythm,
Oh yeah,
who
I
I
know about
think
that.
right now is one of the most popular
Right.
smooth jazz labels there
Hmm.
is. And the opportunity just seemed too good to pass up.
Right.
And so my goal is to at least have a single out by sometime in January,
Okay.
um, and put an album out not long after that. And so
Excellent.
we're working on it right now. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a big step in the next part of my career, especially as a solo artist. Keeping in
Right.
mind that whole taking a leap for myself, I think this
Hmm.
is a big part of it. And so we'll see. And I'd love to keep you guys posted on what's happening.
Most definitely do that. You have my contact information. You will
Yeah.
be added to all of my stuff. And every now and then I'll just check in and find out. And don't get me wrong, you can find out how Brody's doing.
Oh yeah, no, listen. I plan to come and see Brody. You should have told
Cool.
me you had Brody when I was there. We would have been at your house.
Eh, that
Yeah,
that'll be yeah, we'll talk about that later.
yeah.
All right, folks. Once again, we say thank you to Adrian Crutchfield. Look forward to a whole bunch of stuff. You've been listening to the Jazz Flight Podcast. I'm Darrell Scott. We will talk to you next week.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flight Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that groove through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.